Thanks very much. Morning. So for those of you that don't know, my name's Rob Prince. I'm the Client Services Director at Talent Nexus. Big claim, this, novice to expert over breakfast. Spoiler alert, we might not get to expert, but what we will do is have a really good go at forming a really sort of solid foundation of what programmatic advertising is, how it can benefit you, the sorts of kind of concepts and themes you should be thinking about, and how it can kind of improve and affect your businesses. There's lots to get through. I was having a chat with a couple of the guys this morning. So when we bring on a new account exec and add them into the programmatic advertising team, we put them through a pretty intensive sort of 3-month program to get them up to speed on programmatic advertising. Jem, one of the co-founders who's on one of the tables, thought it would be a fun idea to compress that 3 months of learning into sort of morning session and see how far we could get. So that's my job this morning. We'll see how we get on. There's lots and lots to cover. It is expected that there will be lots of questions, lots of kind of bits that aren't quite adding up and you need to kind of ask some questions and get a bit of clarification on. Even though this feels a bit formal, of kind of big screen clicker, I don't want it to feel like that as the morning goes on. If at any point there's anything that you want a little bit of clarification on or anything you want to sort of talk about a bit more, feel free to interrupt me, kind of do that pause. By all means, write down questions on post-it notes, pass them to kind of the table leaders and we'll go through them sort of as and when. The basic format is really simple. So part one, before the break, before we kind of refuel with coffee, what is programmatic and why should you care? We're then going to have that coffee break. That's a great opportunity if there are kind of nagging things that you want to talk about specifically with us or with other kind of peers in the group. That's a great opportunity to kind of have those conversations over. It's quite a long break, sort of 20-minute break for coffee, so we've got plenty of time to kind of relax and also then go again. And then part two is all about, well, now we've got that solid foundation of like, what are we actually talking about? How would you actually go about using it? How would you get the thing they say? Really good time to just like jot it down in a post-it note, and then at each of the breaks and each of our kind of breaks in discussion, the guys kind of have a quick look and make sure that we are actually covering what you guys want to talk about. Very difficult, like writing this, very difficult to guess in advance with something as new as programmatic, like what people actually want to know and talk about. Like for all I know, you could be having never done programmatic ever before, or like complete experts. So we'll kind of work that out as we go. Something to flag really early doors. This is very deliberately quite like an overarching sort of broad brush approach to how programmatic could be used in recruitment. Included within this kind of your kind of attendance at this morning's workshop, we're going to back that up with some extra stuff, which I hope you kind of deepen and sort of breadthen? Yeah. Broaden is better. I think broaden's better. Broaden your kind of understanding and use of. So included within this, so things you can absolutely call us up for is, we'd like to offer all of you like a half-hour detailed kind of specific consultation for your business specifically. So the sorts of themes we'll talk about will vary a lot from business to business and kind of use cases will change. So that's something we'll do. So a half-hour consultation with one of the account directors to kind of talk through your specific challenges. If you're doing this kind of advertising already, if you're doing programmatic or if you're doing advertising full stop, actually, we're happy to do kind of a free audit of what you're doing already and kind of spot where we think that the kind of gaps and opportunities are. There is a programmatic ebook that Alex is putting together, which we can follow up with, which will be a useful kind of reminder of some of the key things we talk about, and also the sort of useful thing that you can just give to like other people in the organisation to get them sort of up to your level, or at least kind of talk through with them. I tell you what, let me ask the Talent Nexus people. Give me a flavour. So who's got a frontline direct recruiter resourcer type on their table? By show of hands. Yeah. Great. Sort of like recruitment managers, recruitment marketee types. Yeah. Okay, cool. Ops, or like the tech version of that. Okay, thank God. Brilliant. Who's, by show of hands, who has done some sort of programmatic advertising before, either themselves or through an agency? Okay, cool. who feels, of those, who feels really confident that they, through that process, really understood what was going on, that they understood the results, and that they'd feel confident kind of explaining it to somebody else or doing it again? Yeah, I think therein lies part of the problem with this industry. Great, okay, perfect. One of the things, I heard you guys talking about programmatic display, also here. Someone who had done programmatic before, was it you guys at the back? When you did programmatic, was that like banners and skyscrapers and like display advertising, or was that programmatic job advertising, or do you not know?
It was consumer focused, it wasn't job.
Oh, okay, great, okay, nice. Good, okay, cool. Everyone introduced. By way of quick introduction to Talent Nexus, I won't go on about this because we've got a website, you can look at that. But Talent Nexus is what you describe as like a full service marketing agency. So we specialise within recruitment. We only work in recruitment. But within recruitment, we work across, we've got like a whole sort of content marketing and video production arm. We've got an analytics sort of division. We also, the sort of bulk of our business is in advertising, and specifically programmatic recruitment advertising, which is what we're specifically talking about today. But I know I've met a few of you through kind of like content marketing and video, so that's the connection. We work across the recruitment industry, so we work with employers like you, but we also work with agencies and job boards. And that gives us this kind of like full market exposure, so we can better understand exactly what's going on kind of behind the scenes. Oftentimes we have a lot of conversations with people who are only in one specific division of that market, and the other bits of it like just don't really make much sense and add up. So often our role is to kind of advise and consult and make sense of what's going in the market as a whole. I'll give you two numbers, one of which is sort of irrelevant, the other one is really relevant. So on advertising alone, we spend on behalf of our clients about £1.5 million a month. Now, I mean, who cares, right? That's neither a small nor a big number, it's all relative. What that does mean, though, is that as an agency, we have literally billions of data points that we can kind of build our understanding of advertising on. So often when we're working with clients and when we're kind of advising organisations, the insight and the value that we can add is that we're making those decisions based on a multiple of the amount of information that they could possibly have themselves, just because we work in that kind of intermediary role. And a lot of the way we talk about programmatic is based on that kind of that sort of wealth of data. This is a slide to let you know that you're in relatively safe hands. So we work with a bunch of big organisations, so we're trusted to know what we're talking about. That's what that slide means, really. Great. Programmatic then. So we're going to start from the very, very beginning. It's very clear as soon as you start talking to anyone really in the recruitment industry that there is a huge amount of like misinformation and miscommunication, misunderstanding surrounding programmatic. If you asked like 100 different recruiters, if you went to something like RecFest and asked 100 different people what's programmatic and why is it useful, you would certainly get 100 different answers. I think one of the challenges is that it's often lumped in with phrases like blockchain, AI, machine learning, robotics. It makes it feel really, really inaccessible, when actually the basics of it are very accessible, and like everyone in this room is perfectly capable of being involved and managing programmatic directly. Unfortunately, it's quite a sexy thing in recruitment at the moment. It's quite new, it feels quite valuable, so it's in suppliers' interest to kind of make it sound as complicated as possible. We're going to try and fix that today and try to flip that on its head and make it as simple as possible. So the first thing we've got to do is get a definition that we can kind of work with. The problem is that the word itself is used to mean quite a lot of different things. It's freezing on me. Great. So we're going to build that definition up together because, like onions, a definition for programmatic has layers. So, no Shrek fans in. Interesting. So there's loads to get through, and the most important thing, as I alluded to earlier, is like this session is all about like leaving no recruiter behind and kind of building that step by step together. So as I said, if at any point there's like a that didn't make any sense moment, or like, oh, you've missed a bit in the definition, we'll stop, we'll go back, we'll rework on it, and then we'll go from there. Cool? Great. So, programmatic, the word itself, very simply means to, like, something that is programmed, adding a level of automation to something, right? It's, there's thousands of examples of programmatic things, early examples being things like programmable VCRs. Millions of things in the world are programmatic, because it's not a particularly fancy word, it just means automating a process in some way. What it does tend to do is it implies a certain like advancement of that automation. So we sometimes describe programmatic as like automation plus. But if at any point you're finding programmatic, like using the phrase programmatic a bit kind of wrong-footing and confusing in a conversation about a process, just replace it with the word automatic or automation, and it normally sort of kind of brings it down into like common sense thinking again. But this could apply to absolutely everything, right? So you could have like programmatic central heating, you could have programmatic traffic management. It's not advertising specific, it's not recruitment specific. Programmatic, the word itself is really, really simple, so don't let that kind of jargon bit put you off early doors. For us, when we hear programmatic, it's normally being used as shorthand for the phrase programmatic advertising, right? So it's the automation of a process, and that process is the buying and management of advertising. Programmatic advertising is not new, right? So ever since Google did advertising, that you've been buying it programmatically because the process of buying it is automated. When you get served an advert on Google, or when you're going around the internet kind of looking at websites and you get like like adverts around the top and sides, no one's sitting there waiting for you to visit the website and then they say, right, serve the advert now, right? It's all an automated process. Nobody is sitting watching the budget trickle down and then turning it off as soon as the budget runs out, right? All of that is automatic. So any online advertising you've ever seen is, by definition, programmatic advertising, right? Not a complicated sort of way of looking at it. But that's just advertising, right? So all social media advertising, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of that is what we would describe as programmatic advertising. So often you will see, like in the industry, you'll see a lot of like advertising agencies. They will advertise that they do programmatic advertising. That requires a little bit of digging, right, to work out whether they're describing just social media advertising as programmatic to make it sound more complicated, or whether they're actually doing what we would describe as programmatic, which is the really advanced, highly managed version of that. But the words themselves are not complicated. So programmatic advertising, I said it's not new, but it is new to recruitment. Because when we talk about programmatic advertising, we're not only talking about social media and Google adverts. We're not talking about the display sorts of advertising that I know a couple of you guys have done. So this isn't just making sure that your adverts show up when people are kind of browsing around the web. There is a unique type of advertising that's relevant to us that makes programmatic particularly valuable. As recruiters, what's the one thing that we advertise that nobody else does? It's jobs. And what's the one advertising channel that we use that nobody else uses? Job boards. So when we talk about programmatic advertising, when you hear people say programmatic in the recruitment space, what they're probably talking about is programmatic recruitment advertising. So what that is, to kind of piece those layers of definition together, we're talking about automating the process of buying and managing job adverts on job boards, i.e., when you've got a job and you post it out to a bunch of job boards, you've got a bit of software in the middle that controls where they go, how long they're advertised for, how much money they spend, how they're prioritised. This makes it, I'm seeing like notes and nodding and stuff. Someone thinks like, what the hell is he talking? How are we doing? Table leaders, any questions on the tables? Oh, good, okay. So we're going there. So just clarify that definition then. Like, programmatic as a phrase, in my opinion, is often misused, or at least it's used in a way that is deliberately or not slightly misleading. You could describe any number of things as programmatic, but actually, when you're out in the industry, when you're thinking about how programmatic recruitment advertising can affect your business, describing any old thing as programmatic is not particularly helpful, and it leads to an awful lot of confusion. They think like, oh, that agency does, or like that company does programmatic, but I didn't think what they did had anything to do with programmatic. It's like, it probably doesn't, right? You can describe virtually anything in the recruitment space as programmatic if you really stretch it. What we're talking about very specifically today is programmatic recruitment advertising, which helps you automate the process of buying and managing job ads, applications, candidates. Cool? Yep. Great. So, that definition I've just given you is the definition that is shared by companies like this. I've put us in the middle because we're the best. But other than that, you might have seen at conferences, you might have met people from Vonk, from ClickIQ. ClickIQ were at literally every conference in the last 4 years, so you've probably come across Richard in ClickIQ. Recruitix you might have heard of, Appcast again. Some of these organisations are massive agencies for whom programmatic is one stream of what they do. Some of these are mainly like software providers, but the definition that I've just given you is the sort of definition that's shared by companies like this. So from now on, when you see these guys and they talk about programmatic, this is the sort of thing that they're talking about. So I referred, when I was talking about programmatic generally, I said it kind of implies like a higher level of automation. So it's not just as simple as doing a really simple task on repeat without ever changing. There's kind of a higher level to it. It's kind of automation plus. Can you give you an analogy to try and paint that picture a little bit better? Going to the supermarket, filling up your trolley, taking your groceries home, paying in the middle, taking your groceries home and loading up the cupboards. That is shopping manually, right? If we consider then going online and ordering your weekly shop and setting that on repeat, that's what I would describe as shopping automatically. I'll try this on for size. So having a smart fridge which sees when you're running out of various things you need, milk, butter, bread, orders them for you automatically and orders them from the retailer that is giving you the best price, that would be shopping programmatically. How'd that land? Oh, great. Cool. So we're talking about a higher level of automation. In the recruitment context, manual job posting. Right? We've probably all done this at some point. Logging onto a website, filling in all the details, hitting post and waiting for applications to roll in. Right? Automatic, Broadbean, Idaboo, one of those, like one, who uses sort of Broadbean, Idaboo, one of the like multi-posters here? A couple of sheepish hands, like, yeah, wish we didn't. ATSs, some of those will do this automatically. Or like you put the job into the ATS and it will automatically share it with Indeed and Monster. Anyone's ATS do that? Anyone else sort of, yeah, kind of like semi-automated version. So we've got manual, we've got automatic. Programmatic then, in recruitment, is loading your job up into your ATS or into a bit of software, and that software working out where those jobs should go, how much you should be spending, how long they should be on for, which sites suit which jobs best, and then turning off the advertisements when you get enough applications through. Cool? On the same page. Brilliant. So what? Love a so what moment. Some of you may well be thinking, that's all very well, but we're actually fine with posting our jobs manually or automatically. Like this isn't a huge pain point of mine. I'm just loading jobs up and getting applications. Anyone feeling like that? Well, actually, who hates doing that process relatively manually and managing their own job applications? So everyone's somewhere in between. Interesting. Why programmatic is relevant has everything to do with how the market has moved over the last 15 years, and more specifically in the last year or so. Because the point being actually that the market didn't move for a very, very long time, which is why programmatic didn't come to the recruitment industry for so long. Now the market has taken a sudden lurch, and suddenly all of this stuff is really relevant. And kind of as an industry, we're like caught on the back foot. We're developing all of these tools and softwares for the first time. We've got big software agencies like bursting onto the scene. ClickIQ making a splash like they did for a year is indicative of exactly how that like market has suddenly exploded. So why does this matter? Well, the reason to that lies in how the market has developed. Allows me giving you a very potted history of how job advertising has worked. So, once upon a time, I certainly wouldn't suggest that anyone in this room was around for this part of job advertising. Job advertising was putting adverts in newspapers and magazines. It was like the classifieds bit. Because they were printed, you would pay for how long they were in the printed publication for, right? So if it was a daily newspaper, you might pay for that day's run or a week or a month. Weekly, monthly periodicals, you might pay to be in 1 or 2 months at a time. But because the way print works, it was duration based. You're paying for the amount of time that your job is in a publication for. That's what we would describe as pay per duration. With the dawn of the internet, that exact model moved online. Right? So online publications, or what became job boards, online publications that specifically posted jobs and nothing else, took that model and did it in exactly the same way. So you would buy an amount of time featured on their job board and hope that applications rolled in throughout the period that you were on the job board for, right? By show of hands, who's bought job advertising like this, like a job slot, a credit for Broadbean? Yeah, pretty much everyone. So, and this was the status quo for at least 10 to 15 years, right? Virtually nothing changed. Job boards got better. They built better audiences. They found new ways to engage with candidates. And you could even do things like, oh, I really need this role filled, so I'm going to get a premium job posting, which just meant that yours was in gold or something. But the basic model of paying for the amount of time that you're on a website stayed exactly the same. So let's talk about that. That's where we got to. The pros, these aren't exhaustive, and actually I'm going to suggest we talk about it kind of on tables for a bit. But in my eyes, the obvious pros are, that's a really simple way to buy advertising. Just like, put me in front of people's faces for an amount of time and we'll get some response. It allows the job boards to start to like specialise and build their audiences. So all they're selling, because it's a simple product, time in front of an audience, their job is really simple as well, right? Build an audience that people want to advertise to and then sell it to them. It's really easy. You can explain that model to literally anybody and they'll get it. I think some obvious kind of flaws with that is that it's really unpredictable, right? So if you post a job up for 30 days, you've got no idea when you're going to get the applications, if you're going to get the applications, if you've posted it in the right place, what the quality is going to be like. You've got no guaranteed ROI. So your guarantee is that you can sack them at the end of the 30 days if you don't get any applications. But you definitely can't do that halfway through, because they could well say, well, you might get all your applications in the last couple of days. It's inflexible. They come in like these chunks of advertising package, so it's quite difficult to kind of mix and match your advertising to the jobs you've got. It can feel very expensive. So if you post a, say, £500 job advert and you only get one application, that might feel really expensive. It could feel really cheap, of course. You could get thousands of applications, but there's the potential for that to feel like very expensive advertising, and it's difficult to scale. In that, if instead of just using Read, you wanted to use 10 job boards, because you know they've all got audiences that are relevant to you, you've literally just got to multiply your budget by 10. There's no way of saying, well, can I have half an advert from you and half an advert from you and half an advert? It doesn't work like that. You're kind of in or out, right? Everyone who's got a bit of experience doing that sort of job advertising, so first opportunity is kind of have a chat together. What are your experiences of this? Like, who are you using at the moment? Who are you advertising with? Is that going, pardon me, good time for a break. Is that going well? What are the challenges that are coming up? Are you getting the candidates you need? All those sorts of things. Let's dive into that. And then, so tech leaders, up to you to kind of facilitate that conversation for a few minutes. And they'd be great to hear like what your experiences of the room are and see if our very kind of individual experience kind of reflecting what's happened in the market generally. And then we'll go from there. Great. Fire away.